As Zhao expected, the undead spirit beasts were wandering around on the Black Waste. Fortunately, there were no longer any undead spirit beasts in the castle, nor did they break the gate or destroy the defensive walls. They were only able to get into the castle by climbing the walls, break everything inside, then climb back out. It had to be recognized that even the most ordinary spirit beast was stronger than any animal on Earth. If there were lions and tigers on the Ark continent, they would starve. When Green saw that everything inside the castle was destroyed, his heart froze, but he didn't panic like an ordinary person would. When he was young, he fought alongside Adam's grandfather, and later his father, on the battlefield, so he had a lot of combat experience. It only took him a couple of seconds to realize that something was wrong. There were no signs of fighting in the castle. Although everything was destroyed, Green could see that there wasn't a trace of blood. The spirit beasts were probably venting their anger when they found nobody in the castle. To make sure, Green carefully explored every room, finding no one. The only explanation he could come up with was that everyone had suddenly disappeared. Just then, a misty hole appeared in the living room, followed by Zhao's voice. "Grandpa Green, come in." Green was shocked. He dodged past the mist and looked inside the hole, but he couldn't see anything. However, he had no other choice, so he jumped inside. Green appeared in the spatial farm, right on the edge of the oil fruit fields. The trees had not bared fruit yet, and there were slaves nearby carefully learning how to read. Marin was next to the slaves, but she was the first one to notice that he had returned. "Green, you're back," she immediately said. Green was looking around in a daze. "Marin, what is this place?" Marin smiled. "This is the young master's space. This is where that magic radish he gave you came from." Then Zhao and Meg ran out of the hut. Zhao quickly moved into Green's open arms. "Grandpa Green, you're finally back." Green smiled. "Yes, master. I'm back." Zhao laughed. "Come on, now that you're back, let's talk inside." He pulled Green along, followed by the others. Inside the hut, Zhao simply told Green about the situation with the space. Hearing what he said, Green's eyes shined, understanding what the spatial farm means for the Buddha clan. Once Zhao finished, Green excitedly said, "This is great, master. With this space, we can revive the Buddha clan." Zhao smiled, then he took a sip of tea. "Grandpa Green, how did the magic radishes sell?" "Master doesn't need to worry," Green said. "I negotiated with the Marquis Company. They agreed to buy our 80,000 kati of radishes, plus an additional 20,000 kati, per month. And if they sell well, they might order even more." "Great. But for how much?" Green smiled. 8 times the market price." Zhao nodded. To be honest, this price exceeded his expectations. He thought that 6 times the market price would have been pretty good. After all, they were selling wholesale, not retail. He then pointed out the fruit trees. "These oil fruits should ripen soon, then we'll be able to get a lot of oil. Will the Marquis Company buy these?" "I don't know," Green said while looking at the trees. "But the Marquis Company pays attention to quality. Since our magic radishes were of good quality, they might take a look. If these oil fruits are also good, they will certainly buy them." Zhao nodded, followed by a frown. "Grandpa Green, I forgot to ask, how is the situation out there on the Black Waste? Are there any spirit beasts around?" Green's brows wrinkled. "There are, but their numbers have lessened. But I suggest that we should wait a few more days before we go out there, unless we want to attract a large number of spirit beasts." Not waiting for Zhao to speak, Meg jumped in. "Grandpa, Master has long thought the same, otherwise we wouldn't still be in here. You see, there is this magical thing that allows us to see the castle. It also helped us find you when you came back." Meg spoke of the screen, which she felt was now even more magical because it could distinguish between friend or foe. Green was curious about this screen, and Zhao wanted to demonstrate it for him, but then the voice suddenly came, "Oil fruit has matured. Please harvest as soon as possible." Zhao was surprised for a moment, but then he left the hut. He looked towards the oil fruit fields that he had planted 4 days ago. The fruit from those trees looked like kiwis from Earth, but it had a smooth blue-grey outer skin, and it was the size of a man's fist. The inside was a greenish yellow, and the juice had a lot of pulp as well as a high oil content. Green was surprised at the sight of them. He knew very clearly that the oil fruits that grew on the continent weren't this large. Looking at all the trees, the amount of oil they could get would definitely not be low. But Zhao didn't know what Green was thinking. He was focusing on trying to figure out how much fruit the space had produced. There were 300 trees, and each tree seemed to have made 1,500 kati worth of fruit. With such a high yield, there would be a total of 450,000 kati of oil fruits. So they could probably extract 300,000 kati of oil, and this was certainly not a low number. However, after he harvests the fruit, it seemed like he would only need 2 days before they mature again. Zhao calculated that in a month, he would be able to grow a batch of oil fruits 9 times. That would mean he could squeeze out 2,700,000 kati of oil per month. After Zhao made these calculations, he said, "Harvest the oil fruits." The basket flew out, collecting all the oil fruits. Green was surprised because this was the first time he had seen such a thing. Green knew of how useful oil fruit could be. In addition to the oil they could make, the remainder of the fruit could be used to feed a lot of spirit beasts. Also, these fruit trees were a multi-batch crop, which had a huge advantage. You wouldn't need to plant them again after every harvest. After the oil fruit was harvested, Zhao went towards the hut, but Green couldn't wait to ask, "Master, how much oil fruit did you harvest?" Zhao smiled. "Around 450,000 kati. Each of these 300 trees yields about 1,500 kati." Green had his head down as he counted it out, thinking of how much oil they could squeeze out of these fruits. "That means we can make 300,000 kati of oil. What a huge yield!" Green knew that in the outside world they would be lucky to produce 500 kati of fruit per tree, but in this space they had grown a heavy 1,500 kati. This wasn't a small difference. "Also, we will be able to harvest from these trees 9 times per month," Zhao said. "And the next harvest is in 2 days." Green excitedly stood up straight, then he paced back and forth. 9 harvests a month. If we could get 300,000 kati of oil from every harvest, that would mean we would eventually get 2,700,000 kati. And each kati of oil is worth 1 copper coin, so we'll get 2.7 million copper coins, which would be equal to 2,700 gold coins. Zhao was surprised at what Green said. He really didn't expect that the oil on the continent would be so cheap, costing even less than a radish. It seemed like these kinds of crops weren't really cost-effective. But Zhao didn't know about the amount of oil that the continent consumed every day. It was an astronomical number. Welcome to the big oil market.